The first time I heard Grant threaten my daughter, the red on-air light was already glowing above her head. Nora sat behind the studio microphone with one hand on the fader and the other pressed flat against the program log. Through the glass, I could see the second hand on the wall clock moving toward 6 in the morning. Grant stood beside her chair, close enough that she had to lean away from him. He did not raise his voice. He knew the microphone was live in less than a minute. "If you tell the board I changed the account access," he said, "I'll tell them why you froze last winter. I'll make sure every donor knows you can't run this place." Nora looked through the glass and saw me in the engineering room. Grant did not. He was watching the levels on her screen as if the station mattered more than the woman sitting in front of it. The clock reached 5:59:50. Nora placed her headphones over her ears. Grant stepped back. I lifted one finger through the glass, the signal I had given her since she was 17. 10 seconds. At 6 o'clock, she opened the microphone and read the River Stage report in the same calm voice our town had trusted for 11 years. No one listening from a kitchen, a pickup truck, or the night desk at the hospital would have guessed what had been said before the music ended. I guessed something worse. This was not the first time. Before I explain why I started recording the calls that came after that morning, tell me where you're listening from tonight. Riverlight FM operated from the second floor of an old bank building in a small Iowa town near the Mississippi. The vault had become our record library. The former loan office was Studio B. The transmitter sat 3 miles away on a bluff where winter wind found every loose seam in the equipment shed. We were a non-profit community station, not a commercial one. Local businesses supported programs through underwriting. We held pledge drives twice a year, read school closings before sunrise, carried city council meetings, aired high school games, and kept emergency equipment ready for weather alerts. The station also had an online public file full of ownership information, applications, and reports about how we served the community. Most listeners never looked at it. Grant did. He understood that a small station could sound informal while still carrying serious obligations. So did I. I had been Riverlight's first engineer and one of its founders. My wife, Evelyn, had been a newspaper copy editor before she built our oral history program. She interviewed retired lock workers, farm wives, nurses, barbers, and men who still remembered when the river froze hard enough for people to walk across it. Evelyn never treated a microphone like permission. Before every interview, she asked where the recording could be used, what name the person wanted, and whether anything should stay private. She had ended interviews that would have made good radio because the person speaking no longer felt sure. I admired that about her. I did not learn enough from it. Nora grew up inside the station. When she was 8, she sorted pledge envelopes by zip code. At 12, she could splice damaged tape without touching the recorded surface. At 17, she read her first weather bulletin after a summer storm knocked out the regular host's phone line. Her hands shook so badly that the paper rattled near the microphone. I stood behind the glass and pointed at the clock. "Read the next line," I told her through the talkback button. "Then the next one." She did. When the bulletin ended, she turned off the microphone and started laughing from relief. Evelyn hugged her. I told her the listeners had never heard the shaking. For years, I remembered that as encouragement. Nora remembered a different sentence: "Never let them hear you lose control." Grant came to Riverlight 15 years later as an underwriting coordinator. He had worked in marketing for a regional farm equipment company, where he earned more than our station could pay. He left that job after marrying Nora because the travel kept him away 4 nights a week. He was good at the station work. That belongs in the story. Grant could explain our audience without making a local business owner feel pressured. He knew the difference between an underwriting acknowledgement and an advertisement. He could shorten a 30-second message without insulting the person paying for it. During pledge drives, he brought in enough matching support to keep the phones ringing after dinner. He also accepted a smaller salary than his previous job and handled more responsibility than his title suggested. When our old transmitter began dropping power during humid weather, Grant found a donor willing to cover most of the replacement. I had called that donor twice and made the conversation harder by acting as if I still approved every decision. Grant had reason to resent me. I was no longer the station manager, but I remained board chair emeritus, which was a ceremonial title until I decided it was not. I called underwriters I knew personally. I questioned new programs. I walked into staff meetings without being invited and described it as checking the equipment. Nora asked me to stop. I stopped for a week at a time. Our family's unwritten rule was that no disagreement could interfere with the broadcast. No matter who was angry, somebody opened the microphone at the top of the hour. The audience did not pay for our private confusion. That rule protected the station. It also taught Nora to finish every program before deciding whether she was safe. After the 6 o'clock show, I waited in the hallway outside Studio A. Nora removed her headphones, checked the recorder, and exported the segment to the archive. Grant left through the sales office without looking at me. I asked, "Did he change your account access?" Nora kept naming the audio file, the underwriting database. He said he was fixing permissions. "Did you ask him to?" "No." "What happened last winter?" She clicked save and watched the progress bar move across the screen. "I had a bad morning." He called it freezing. He calls it a lot of things. "Does he threaten your job often?" Nora turned toward me. "Dad, I have another show in 20 minutes. That is not an answer. It is the answer I can give before 6:30. She walked into the newsroom. I followed her far enough that she stopped and looked back. "Please," she said, "do not call the board. Do not call Grant. Let me get through the morning." There it was again, the broadcast before the decision. I went downstairs and found Evelyn in the small production room, labeling interviews for the county archive. She had stopped serving on the board years earlier, after I used a tie-breaking vote to cancel a program she supported. She listened while I described what Grant had said. Then she asked, "What did Nora ask you to do?" "Nothing yet." "That is not what I asked." She told me not to call anyone. Evelyn wrote a date on the side of a storage box. "Can you do that?" "For how long?" "For as long as she asked." He threatened to lie about her ability to run the station. "I heard you." "What am I supposed to do, Evelyn?" "Start by not making her manage your fear too." I left the room irritated because she had answered a different question than the one I wanted to ask. At home that evening, I found an old field recorder in my desk. It was smaller than the machines we used when Riverlight began, but the habit was the same. Check the batteries, set the level, name the file before memory starts changing the details. I did not switch it on. I called Nora first. She answered from her car. "I'm going to Marcy's apartment," she said, before I asked. Marcy was our afternoon host and Nora's closest friend at the station. "Are you leaving Grant?" "I'm sleeping somewhere else tonight." "Has he threatened you outside work?" Nora breathed out slowly. "He says if I embarrass him, he'll make sure I lose the station and the house before he does." "Do you believe he can?" "I believe he wants me to believe it." That was the first clear answer she gave me. I asked whether she wanted me to come. "No." "Do you want your mother?" "I already called her." The small jealousy I felt then embarrasses me. Nora had chosen Evelyn because Evelyn knew how to be present without taking the room apart. Before we ended the call, Nora said, "Grant may call you. Do not negotiate for me." "I won't, Dad. I heard you." Grant called 27 minutes later. I was sitting at my kitchen table with the field recorder beside my right hand. I had checked the Iowa rule before. A person on the call could record it. That answered whether I could press the button. It did not answer every question about what I might do with the file afterward. When his name appeared, I pressed record before I answered. The level bars began moving. Grant said, "You need to tell Nora to come home. I am not negotiating for her. She ran to Marcy because you filled her head this morning. I did not speak to her until after the show. You were staring through the glass like I had a knife. You threatened her position. I told her there are consequences if she goes around accusing me." "What accusation?" He hesitated. Then he said, "She wants to tell the board I control her accounts. I manage underwriting. Of course I control those accounts. You changed her access without asking, because she keeps moving money between program lines and pretending budgets are feelings. That sounds like a disagreement for the board." "No, Sam, this is a marriage. The board hears what I tell them it hears." I watched the level bars rise when his voice tightened. "What happens if Nora does not come home?" I asked. Grant answered carefully at first. He said the station could not survive a scandal during pledge month. He said 2 full-time employees depended on him closing renewals. He said Nora had canceled meetings, changed programming without budgets, and left him to explain the shortfall. Some of it was true. Then he said, "If she turns this into abuse, I'll make sure people hear the recording from last winter." "What recording?" "The show she couldn't finish." Nora had suffered a panic response during a live interview after a guest unexpectedly mentioned the death of a friend. She muted the microphone, left Studio A, and Marcy completed the segment. I had told the staff to treat the raw audio as internal. Grant had kept a copy. I asked, why? "Because facts matter when somebody rewrites a marriage. That file belongs to the station. So does her reputation." "No, it does not." He became quiet. I could hear the turn signal in his car. Then he said, "Tell her I can remove her from the morning show before she wakes up tomorrow. Tell her I can make the board afraid of her. And tell her if she keeps my daughter from me, I will use everything I have." My granddaughter, Lucy, was 13 and staying with Grant's sister that night. Nora had not kept her from anyone. I said, "You are threatening her job and using your child to frighten her." "I am telling you what she is risking." The call lasted 14 minutes and 11 seconds. When it ended, I saved the file under the date. That was the first recording. I did not call the board. I called Evelyn. She came into the kitchen wearing her reading glasses on top of her head and listened to the file once without interrupting. At the end, she reached over and stopped the recorder before it could begin playing again. "Does Nora know you did this?" she asked. "Not yet." "Then tell her before you do anything else. He has station audio he should not have. And you have a recording of her marriage she does not know exists." I was part of the call. That answers whether you could record it. It does not answer what you should do with it. I called Nora. She came over after Lucy was settled at Grant's sister's house. She stood at the kitchen counter while the file played. She did not sit. When Grant mentioned the raw audio from the previous winter, she reached for the recorder, then pulled her hand back. "I asked him to delete that," she said. "Why did he have it?" Evelyn asked. "He was covering the morning show that day." He exported the backup before Marcy took over. Did he ever use it against you before? Nora stared at the time display on the recorder. He plays 10 seconds sometimes. I thought I had misunderstood. At home? When I tell him he is making me feel crazy, he plays the part where I cannot finish a sentence and asks which one of us sounds stable. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. I said, "We take this to the board tonight." Nora's head came up. "No. He is using station property to threaten you." I said no. "Then what do you want?" "I want a copy. I want to talk to an advocate. I want Grant's access separated from mine, without everybody in town deciding what happened before I understand it myself. The station cannot leave him in control of those systems. I know that. Then we cannot wait." Evelyn said my name once. Nora looked at me. "You asked what I want," I answered. "Do not turn the question into a delay before you do what you already decided." I made 2 copies of the recording. Nora took one. Evelyn kept the other in a locked archive cabinet that did not belong to the station. I kept the original. For the next 3 days, River Light sounded normal. Nora hosted the morning show. Grant met with underwriters. Marcy ran the afternoon music block. Volunteers recorded community announcements in Studio B. At noon on Wednesday, the emergency alert system equipment ran its weekly test and printed a narrow strip of paper that curled onto the engineering desk. The station had always taught me how easily normal sound could conceal private disorder. On Thursday, the first visible crack appeared in the pledge drive schedule. A local credit union postponed its matching hour. Then a farm cooperative asked whether Nora would still be managing the spring campaign. A restaurant owner who had supported the station for 8 years told Marcy that Grant had warned him about leadership instability. Nora called Grant into the conference room. I was not there, but Marcy was, because Nora wanted another staff member present. Grant denied using the word unstable. He said underwriters had questions and he had answered them honestly. Marcy told me later that the conversation ended with Grant saying, "If Nora wants to run the station, she needs to stop treating every hard answer like a threat." Nora removed his ability to change staff logins. She did not remove his underwriting access because the campaign began in 12 days and no one else knew every renewal. That decision divided the staff. Our news director thought Grant should be suspended. The volunteer coordinator worried the pledge drive would collapse without him. One board member asked whether this was a marital dispute being disguised as a governance problem. Another asked why the board had allowed a married couple to control so many connected systems in the first place. I knew the answer to that last question, because I had said family trust was enough. On Friday afternoon, a line of thunderstorms crossed the river. The National Weather Service issued warnings west of town, and the station shifted from regular programming to local updates. Nora was at the microphone. Marcy monitored calls. I drove to the transmitter site because the reflected power reading had been wandering whenever rain reached the bluff. Grant arrived before I did. He had left an underwriting lunch when he saw the warning. By the time I reached the shed, he had already started the backup air conditioner and cleared water from the lower door seal. He held a flashlight while I checked the transmitter cabinet. For 20 minutes, we worked without discussing Nora. The station stayed on the air. That matters too. Grant cared about River Light. He knew people in farmhouses listened when the sky turned green. He knew the station's phone rang when a road flooded or a school bus ran late. He had built relationships I had never bothered to learn. When the worst of the storm moved east, he leaned against the workbench and said, "You think I am trying to destroy her? I heard what you said. You heard one call after she left with Lucy. Lucy was with your sister. Because Nora made plans without me. She was trying to feel safe. Grant shook his head. You always use that word after you have decided who the bad man is. I have not decided what you are. I know what you did. He looked at the transmitter, meters through the cabinet window. He asked whether I knew how often Nora had handed him underwriter meetings because she could not breathe. I did not. He asked about the nights he rewrote grant reports while she sat in Studio A listening to old shows. Again, I had no answer. Then he said she had wanted to cancel the pledge drive 3 weeks earlier, without telling the board. I had known nothing about it. Grant continued. He said Nora had been making decisions alone, then accusing him of control when he tried to stop them. He said I had trained her to treat the station like a family inheritance instead of a community license. He had also given up a better-paid career, taken calls during vacations, and spent years being introduced as Nora's husband, even when the underwriting success was his. There was truth in that complaint. Then he said, if she takes the station from me, I take the story from her. The sentence changed the room. What does that mean? I asked. It means she does not get to make me the villain on air, in court, or with Lucy. Has she threatened to do any of those things? She will. You are punishing her for something you expect her to do. Grant picked up his wet jacket. You did that to people for 30 years, Sam. You called it maintenance. He left the transmitter shed before I could answer. I stayed another hour, though the equipment no longer needed me. The fans inside the transmitter made a steady sound that I had trusted most of my adult life. When something went wrong, the pitch changed. A trained ear could hear it before the meter moved. I had trained Nora to hear every change in a room except the one inside herself. That evening, she called and said Grant had agreed to stay with his brother for a week. He restored the account permissions he had changed. He also returned the station laptop containing the raw audio from her unfinished show. Maybe he finally understands how far this went, she said. Do you believe that? I believe he is scared. That is not the same. No, it is not. She asked me not to contact him. I agreed. For 2 days, the arrangement held. Nora and Grant communicated by email about Lucy and the pledge drive. Marcy sat in on staff decisions. Evelyn stayed with Nora at night, not because Nora asked for protection, but because the apartment felt too quiet after years of marriage. On Monday morning, Grant came to the station for a scheduled transition meeting. Nora asked me to attend because the discussion involved the old audio and the account access. She also asked Marcy to sit near the door. Before Grant arrived, I placed the field recorder on the conference table. Nora saw it. No, she said. He threatened you on the last call. This meeting is supposed to be about handing things over. If he says nothing threatening, the file stays private. You are already planning the next threat. I am planning for the possibility. Nora looked toward the hallway. Put it away. I should have. Instead, I said, I am part of the meeting. I will tell him it is being recorded. I didn't ask whether you could. Grant walked in before the argument ended. He noticed the recorder immediately. What is that? I answered, a recording. I am telling you now. Grant laughed without humor. Of course it is, Nora said. I asked him not to. That should have ended the meeting. It did not. Grant sat down and slid the station laptop toward Nora. He had deleted his personal login and provided a list of underwriting contacts. The handoff was more complete than I expected. For the first 15 minutes, he was calm. He admitted changing Nora's permissions. He said he believed she was moving money without board approval. Nora said the transfers were temporary shifts between approved program lines. Marcy asked why he had not brought the concern to the finance committee. Grant said, because every committee has one of her father's friends on it. I began to answer. Nora stopped me with a look. Grant apologized for using the old audio at home, not cleanly. He said, I should not have played it like that. Nora asked, like what? To prove a point. What point? That you were not remembering the argument right. You played me having a panic response until I stopped arguing. Grant rubbed his thumb along the edge of the table. I said I should not have done it. Nora asked whether he still had another copy. He said no. Marcy asked the same question in a different way. Grant looked at her. I returned the laptop. That is not an answer, she said. His calm began to thin. He accused Marcy of interfering in his marriage. He accused me of building a case. He told Nora she was letting employees humiliate him in a station he had helped save. Nora said, then leave the station. We can deal with the marriage somewhere else. Grant's chair moved back. If I leave, he said, the pledge drive misses its target. 2 people lose hours. The board blames you. Then I give them the raw file and explain why you cannot finish a live interview without somebody rescuing you. Nora looked at the recorder, then at me. Stop the meeting, she said. I should have pressed stop. Instead, I asked Grant, who else has the file? Nora said my name. Grant answered, enough people. Names. Why? So you can call them before lunch? Who has it? He leaned toward me. You want every word? Fine. Nora is done at this station. Nora said, Grant? No. You wanted him here. Let him hear it. He pointed toward the recorder. Lucy will know who broke this family. The board will hear about the bathrooms, the missed meetings, all of it. Stop, Nora said. And if you lock me out of the house, I will fight every dollar until you cannot afford to keep doing this. Nora stood. The recorder kept running. Grant looked at her and said, sit down. We are not finished. She left the room. Marcy followed her. I remained seated for 3 more seconds before switching off the recorder. 3 seconds can be a long time when the right action is obvious. Grant looked at the dark display. You got what you wanted, he said. I did not answer because part of me had. I found Nora in Studio B with both palms on the console, staring at a row of switches that were not turned on. Marcy stood near the door. She had not put a hand on Nora or told her what to do. That was one reason Nora trusted her. I set the recorder on the desk. Nora did not look at it. You kept going, she said. I needed him to say who had the file. I said stop. I heard you. Then why did I have to leave before you listened? There was no answer that improved me. Grant had threatened her. I had been afraid for her. Both things were true. They did not change the fact that I had turned her fear into one more technical problem I believed I could solve if I captured enough clean audio. Marcy asked me whether I had made a second copy. No. Have you sent it anywhere? No. Nora held out her hand. Give it to me. I gave her the recorder. She removed the memory card, placed it in a plastic case from the production drawer, and wrote the date on the label. Her handwriting remained even. That bothered me more than if she had shouted. I'm taking this to the advocate, she said. I decide what happens to it. I nodded. And you do not call the board chair. All right. She added the sponsors and Grant's brother to the list. I was not to contact them or explain that I had been protecting her. All right? She finally looked at me. You keep treating my life like the station. Something goes wrong, and you reach for the panel. I started to say that panels responded when you reached for them. I stopped before the sentence left me. Marcy drove Nora to meet the family advocate in Cedar Rapids. I went downstairs and sat in the old bank lobby, where the terrazzo floor still showed pale squares from counters removed decades earlier. Evelyn came in through the side entrance around noon. Nora had called her from the highway. My wife lowered herself into the chair beside me and asked one question. Did she tell you to stop? Yes. And you kept recording? For a few seconds. Evelyn looked toward the stairwell. You keep saying a few seconds, as if she did not say it twice. I wanted to defend the usefulness of those seconds. Grant had said enough to show a pattern. He had linked Nora's job, her child, her money, and her marriage in one uninterrupted threat. The recording could keep him from changing the story later. Evelyn knew all of that. She also knew me. I know why you were scared, she said. I don't understand why being scared meant Nora lost the decision. I stayed in the lobby until Nora returned. She did not speak to me. She went upstairs with Marcy and copied one portion of the recording onto the advocate's encrypted drive. Then she called Dana Reeve, the chair of River Lights Board, and requested an emergency personnel meeting. She made the call herself. The meeting happened 2 evenings later, after the last pledge phones had been shut down. The volunteers who normally occupied the community room were sent home. A half-finished thermometer poster leaned against the wall, showing the station $78,000 short of its spring goal. Grant arrived with a legal pad and no attorney. He had been told the board was reviewing workplace conduct and access controls, not deciding his marriage. Nora sat at one end of the table. Dana sat at the other. The remaining board members joined in person, except for a retired teacher whose face appeared on a laptop beside the coffee maker. I was present because Grant had requested that the board hear how I arranged the recorded meeting. That was fair. Grant spoke first. He said the station had become unmanageable because its founder refused to let the next generation lead. He described years of late-night calls from me about transmitter readings, sponsor language, and program changes. He reminded the board that I had asked donors to reconsider pledges after Nora and Grant canceled one of Evelyn's oral history reruns. I had done that. He said I had used my daughter's marriage as another route back into an organization that no longer belonged to me. It was not the whole truth, but it was close enough to hurt. Then he talked about his work. He had increased underwriting revenue during 3 difficult years and persuaded a regional clinic to sponsor the health call-in show. When lightning damaged the backup transmitter, he spent a weekend calling donors, while I criticized the replacement unit he could afford. He reminded the board that he had left a better-paid job because Nora called the station family. In practice, he said, family had meant I could overrule him without holding a title. No one interrupted him. Grant's voice changed when he reached the conference room recording. He said I had invited him into a meeting under false pretenses, pushed him until he became angry, and kept recording after Nora told me to stop. Dana turned to me. Is that accurate? Yes. Grant glanced around the table. He had expected me to qualify it, but I did not. Everyone had been told the recorder was on. Nora had still ended the meeting, and I had asked another question anyway because I believed the answer would protect her. I had not asked whether she wanted protection at that price. Nora said, I'm not asking you to hear that recording. What Dad did after I said stop is not in dispute. Dana looked at the encrypted drive beside Nora's legal pad. Then what are you asking us to hear? The call before it, Nora said. Grant turned toward her. What call? Until then, he had believed the 14-minute conversation existed only in his memory and mine. Nora had not told him I recorded it. Neither had the advocate. Nora asked him 3 plain questions. Had he told me the board would hear whatever he wanted it to hear? Had he threatened to remove her from the morning show? Had he said he would use Lucy and the old studio audio if she did not come home? Grant said, I told Sam there would be consequences. He hears a threat whenever someone tells him no. Nora nodded to Dana, who started the file. The first voice was mine, answering the phone. Then came Grant's turn signal, the pause before he mentioned the winter recording, and the part he had not known anyone could replay. His own voice came through the speaker, claiming he controlled what the board would hear. Then it carried his instructions to warn Nora that he could remove her before morning, frighten the board, and use everything he had if she kept Lucy from him. Grant did not look ashamed at first. He looked exposed, then angry, and I could not tell whether the anger was aimed at Nora or me. Dana stopped the excerpt after 71 seconds. The advocate retained the complete original call, including the ordinary parts before and after those words. Nothing from the openly recorded conference meeting had been needed to establish the threat. Grant stared at the recorder file name on Dana's screen. You recorded a private call? I was on the call, I said. He looked at Nora. And you brought it here? Yes, she said. My father made the recording. I decided how it would be used. Grant said he had been angry and believed Nora was taking Lucy away. He said he had spoken privately to a man who had interfered in their marriage for years. Both complaints had truth in them. He did not explain why either one required threatening Nora's job. The retired teacher asked who had received Nora's old audio. The treasurer asked whether station equipment had been used to store it. Dana asked whether Grant had changed account permissions without Nora's approval. Grant answered some questions and avoided others. He admitted giving a short excerpt to one board member for context and telling 2 underwriters that Nora was struggling. He denied trying to remove her, then explained why replacing her might have been necessary. That contradiction did more than any speech I could have given. Nora asked him one question. Did you ever believe I could say no to you without losing something? Grant looked down at the yellow legal pad. I believed we were making decisions together. That isn't an answer. It is the answer I have. The board placed Grant on paid administrative leave while an outside human resources consultant reviewed access, communications, and the use of station recordings. Dana suspended both Grant's and Nora's authority over underwriting accounts until 2 unrelated board officers could verify every change. Nora did not object. She knew the review would examine her too. The station did not collapse the next morning. Real consequences rarely arrive with that kind of efficiency. They arrived by subtraction. A farm equipment dealer paused its annual pledge because the owner did not want his name near a family dispute. The clinic delayed renewal until Riverlight could show who controlled sponsor agreements. Without Grant's call list, the spring campaign finished $41,000 below budget. 2 part-time producers lost 6 hours a week for the summer. One of them blamed Grant. The other blamed Nora for not keeping the problem private until after the pledge drive. Both reactions made sense from where they stood. The outside review took 7 weeks. It found that Grant had used access intended for underwriting work to copy internal audio and monitor Nora's schedule. It also found years of poor governance, married employees supervising linked accounts, founders contacting donors outside formal channels, and a board that depended on family loyalty instead of written controls. My name appeared in that section more than once. Grant resigned before the board could vote on termination. He did not lose everything. A regional arts organization later hired him on a short contract because he was still good at raising money. Nora hated hearing that. Then she said, being employable was not the same as being safe to live with. She filed for a formal separation and worked through her advocate and the court process to set communication and parenting rules. Nothing about it was quick. There were schedules, hearings, changed pickup locations, and weeks when every ordinary question seemed to require another adult in the room. Grant complied with some limits and argued about others. He never became a monster in public. That made it harder for people who had only seen his patient side to understand why Nora did not simply reconcile. For a while, Lucy believed I had caused the separation because Grant told her I hated him. Nora did not correct that with a counterattack. She told her daughter that the adults had made choices and that none of them were Lucy's responsibility. I had to live with being misunderstood by a child I loved. Nora had to live with much more. The board's final report required new financial controls, separate passwords, documented consent for internal recordings, and an independent supervisor for any family members working at the station. It also recommended removing my founder emeritus voting privileges. Dana came to my house to tell me before the public meeting. "You can fight it," she said. "The bylaws are vague." Evelyn sat across from us with her arms folded. I asked Dana what she thought. "I think you helped build something this town needs," she said. "I also think everyone has been afraid to tell you when helping became governing." I signed the resignation before the meeting. It cost me more than I expected. For 32 years, I had entered the station before dawn without asking anyone to let me in. I knew which floor tile outside Studio A clicked in damp weather. I could identify a failing fan by the pitch beneath a host's voice. When a thunderstorm approached from the west, people still called me before they checked the manual. At midnight after my resignation, the administrator removed my building access. The next morning I drove to the bluff out of habit and remained outside the transmitter fence. A new contract engineer's truck was parked beside the shed. I could hear the cooling fans through the wall. One of them was slightly out of balance. I did not call anyone. Nora came to our house 3 weeks later. She stood in the living room while Evelyn remained in the kitchen, close enough to hear and far enough not to rescue either of us. Nora said the station had adopted the new policies. The board wanted her to remain general manager after the review, but only with quarterly oversight and no direct control over family-related contracts. "That's reasonable," I said. "Yes." She looked at the shelf where I kept old station awards. "He kept playing that clip whenever I disagreed with him," she said. "You kept recording after I disagreed with you. I know those are not the same thing. I also know what both of them felt like." I began to explain the difference, then stopped. She had already said she knew there was one. "I'm sorry," I said. Nora waited. I tried again without the part that excused me. "You told me to stop. I did not stop." Her shoulders lowered a little. "I needed you to believe me before you had a perfect recording." "I did believe you." "No. You believed there was a problem. You did not believe I could decide what happened next." She was right. All my life, I had trusted steady signals, a clean waveform, a stable voltage, a voice that did not shake. Nora had learned the same lesson too well. "A steady voice is not the same as a free one," I said. She looked toward the kitchen, then back at me. That should have been something you taught me at 17. Yes. She did not hug me. She did not tell me everything was repaired. She asked for 6 months without advice about the station, Grant, the separation, or Lucy, unless she requested it. I agreed. The 6 months were quiet. Riverlight hired a part-time development coordinator and rebuilt the pledge calendar around smaller sponsors. The schedule lost 2 local shows and gained a volunteer-produced program about river towns. Nora stopped doing the morning shift every day. Some listeners complained that she sounded less committed. She sounded more rested to me. I kept my promise most days. Once, after hearing distortion in a remote broadcast, I drafted a long email to the engineer. I deleted it before sending. Another time, I drove halfway to the station during an ice storm and turned around at the county road. Restraint did not feel noble. It felt like leaving a tool on the bench while someone else learned how to use it. 7 months after the board meeting, Riverlight aired a live program marking the anniversary of a historic flood. Nora interviewed a retired levee worker, a nurse, and a grocery store owner who had run supplies by boat. I listened from my truck in the station parking lot. Near the end of the hour, I heard a low hum beneath the guest microphone in Studio B. It was faint, probably a grounding problem in the patch cable. At 8:04, the on-air light went dark behind the second-floor window. My phone rang. Nora said, "Are you outside?" "Yes." "Did you hear the hum?" "Yes." A pause followed. "Can you look at it?" she asked. 10 minutes. Marcy stays in the room, and you tell us what you see before you touch anything." I looked at the locked entrance. "Do you want me in there?" "For the hum," she said. "Tonight, that's all. That's enough." She came downstairs and opened the door. I followed her up and waited beside the console until Marcy joined us. Would you have kept recording after Nora said stop, or ended the meeting and trusted her to choose what came next?